I'm Dr. Mark Hatala, and I want to welcome you to our discussion of common student errors with references, so how to avoid them in your paper. But let's get started with a plea to please buy my books. So I have 3 books on APA style, which will help you with your writing and make you a more confident writer of APA style. And a lot of the examples that I use in this presentation are actually from APA style disasters. So if you have a citation in your paper, the reference page had better contain that source. Now, I included this also in my presentation on common problems with citations, but it's worth mentioning in both. For me, the number one red flag for plagiarism in a student paper is when the references don't match the citations, because that means that they're using sources that they're not identifying on the reference page. So the solution to this is to keep a rough draft of your reference page as you write. Then you won't have any problems with a match between your citations and your references. When students aren't sure what to capitalize, they default to just capitalizing everything. And this really comes down to sentence case versus title case. And I have another video on that if you want to watch that. References, though, are in sentence case. So just like in a sentence, the first word of a sentence is capitalized, and then nothing else is. So that's something to keep in mind. Missing information. Students often leave required information off of a reference. So stuff like volume numbers, page numbers, DOI. It's just a lack of attention to detail. So that is an example from a student paper where the Schwartz, Strack, and Rittenauer Shatka, they left off not only their initials, but they also left off 2 other authors, Bless and Klump. They wrote the title of the article in title case instead of sentence case, and they left off both the journal, the volume number, the issue, and the page numbers. And so there's a lot of information missing from that. So, and that's essentially what happens is your professor can just Google that article and then fill in the other information, but the student still has done the reference wrong. Retrieval information. So we might like to think of APA style as basically unchanging, but the truth is that it changes with every new edition. So we're now in the 7th edition, which just came out, but when the 5th edition came out in 2001, the internet was still a pretty novel invention for retrieving sources. And so you had to include retrieval information in with your references. Now, it was a quagmire of mistakes. And so therefore they modified it in the 6th edition, and they've modified it again in the 7th edition. So that in the 7th edition, retrieval information is required only for sources where the material will change over time and is not archived. And so this really just means online dictionaries, because even something like Wikipedia is archived. And so theoretically, you could go back to the source that a particular person used in their paper. But again, you shouldn't use Wikipedia in your papers. Students routinely provide retrieval information in their references. So, for example, this Bauer GH, there's a problem because they don't put spaces between the G and the H. There's just a lack of punctuation, no period after memory, although they are correctly putting it in sentence case. American Psychologist, which is the journal, should be in italics, and it's not. And the volume number should also be in italics. We don't need to know when the student retrieved the article. Instead, we can put a DOI, which is where it's a digital object identifier number, which is where it's permanently stored in this digital archive. Other students report that information was retrieved from EBSCOhost or Google. It's not necessary. Students sometimes treat journal articles as if they were websites. And so they find an article online and then they treat it as if it was a website. So ND stands for no date. There's actually a date for that. It was May 24th, 2012. Nature is the name of the journal, and so therefore it should be in italics. And rather than putting the URL and the retrieval information, we can put the DOI information at the end of the citation. Websites are often updated, and so the latest revision would appear in your reference. So this is an article or a web page about information about seasonal affective disorder. So they retrieved it February 8th, 2018, but the website date is 2011. The corrected is below that, where also it's written by Mayo Clinic staff, not whatever that is, Mayo Clinic. We put seasonal affective disorder in italics. Mayo Clinic is essentially the publisher, and then we put the URL at the end. Group authors. So students often mistake group authors as being no authors. And so this student is using a definition of PTSD off of the National Institute of Mental Health website. And because they didn't realize that there's a group author, they put unknown. They also put no date, which there is a date of when it was last revised, which was May 2019. And they also did not use italics. And although they did provide the correct URL. And so that is very good too. But included retrieval information. It's just, I see these problems over and over and over again. And so that's why I thought I would make this presentation. So we'll finish with our lightning round. And so these are just small things that I see over and over again too. Writing out vol or number when you mean volume. You don't need to write volume. You just put the number, the volume number. And you don't need to write number. You just put the number. Not using italics. So the volume needs to be in italics. The name of the journal needs to be in italics. Including academic titles in a reference. So referring to somebody as doctor, or putting in that they have an MD, or professor of psychology. I see that all the time. That's not included in a reference. Shouldn't be included in a paper either. Including academic affiliations in a reference. Okay, I don't know why that is true either. It's not like people at Harvard are doing better research than people at Ohio State or something like that. They're just, academic affiliations don't matter, and they change pretty frequently too. So don't bother to include that sort of thing in a reference. I want to thank you for listening to this, as it's like a therapy session for me, and so I appreciate it. I want to wish you good luck with your writing and encourage you to visit us at apacentral.com, where you'll find more videos and more material to help you be a better writer.